Hey, what's up guys? Spring is here. Spring has sprung. A lot of you will be eager to hang up the winter jackets and head out and take some beautiful photos of what happens in spring. Lambs? Anyway, today I wanted to cover 3 topics. I was going to do them in 3 separate videos, but I thought each one kind of plays off the other, so I thought I'd compact them all into this one great video for your viewing pleasure. So these 3 things are your aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is your aperture. Now this relates to the little numbers on the side of your lens go from 22 down to 4 or 1.4 even sometimes. And it's usually measured in f-stops or t-stops for some cinema lenses. And this number determines how much light is going through your lens and hitting your camera sensor. Now strangely, the larger the number, so f16, f22, the smaller your aperture, which means the less light is hitting your sensor. And at the other end of the scale, you've got f2.8, f1.4, which means the larger your aperture, which means it's letting a lot of light through that lens and onto your camera sensor. Now this has an effect of either lightening your image or darkening your image. But this isn't all it does. It also affects the depth of field, basically your focus plane in your image. So say you were to use a small f-stop number, say 2.8 or 1.4, the depth of field will be really narrow, which means you get a nice blurry out of focus surrounding to your subject. So you can see here, like the frame around me, it's slightly out of focus, it's nice and blurry, it kind of draws attention to me in the center. But then on the other end of the scale, if you use something like f16 or f22, it means it's going to have a really big depth of field. Everything's going to be in focus. So you want to use that for like some really nice landscape shots and just get everything super tack sharp. But something that also affects how much light's getting to your sensor is your camera's shutter speed. And that is pretty much how it sounds. It is the speed of your camera's shutter. It's how long the shutter of your camera exposes your sensor to light. So say you had a shutter speed of 2 seconds, it'll open that shutter for 2 seconds and then close. The longer, the more light will hit it, which means the brighter the image. The shorter, the less light, the darker the image. But this also affects how much motion blur you get. Say you're using a really fast shutter speed of say 1,000th of a second. That shutter is not going to be open for very long. It's going to be like click, done. Which means not a lot of movement is going to happen in that short space of time, which means you're going to get really nice crispy images. This is really good for kind of action sports, say like football or baseball, where you want to capture that moment in time, the action shot of the guy swinging his bat, something like that. You want a really short shutter speed to capture that instant. On the other hand, if you had a longer shutter speed, say 1 second up to like 10 seconds, you'll get a lot of movement in that time, and that's where motion blur comes in. Take a nice picture of a waterfall. You want a kind of longer shutter speed and make all that water look kind of silky and smooth. So the shutter speed affects how much motion blur you want in your image, but also how much light's getting into your camera. In that sense, you can use it to counteract some effects you might get from what your aperture's set at. Say you wanted a really nice landscape photo. You want everything to be tack sharp. Crank your aperture up to f22, so everything's crispy sharp, but it's also dark, really darkened your image. So what do? Not a lot's moving in that image, so slow down your shutter speed to like, say 5 seconds. As one increases, the other kind of decreases and balances itself out, so you get a really nicely exposed image. So that kind of gives you an idea of how shutter speed and aperture kind of play off one another. Okay, so there's another way you can determine how bright your image is when you take it, and that is using the ISO. Now your ISO doesn't affect your depth of field and it doesn't affect your motion blur. It just affects how sensitive your sensor is to light. Ideally, you want this to be as low a number as possible. The larger the number, a lot of noise will start appearing around your photo and it will just look ugly and muddy and not nice at all. You want to keep that number as low as possible. But usually you can crank it up a little bit, kind of keep that nice crisp image, but also kind of counteract some of the effects that both aperture and shutter speed have on your image. If you want that image to be that little bit brighter, you can do so by increasing your ISO. It's essentially adding a butt ton of gain to your image. It's just brightening everything up. Okay, so I think I've covered everything I wanted to in this video. You can kind of see how one plays off the other, and you can tailor it to what image you're trying to get. If you've got any questions, please leave a comment down below. I'll be happy to try and answer it. Thank you again for watching these videos. I'll try and do them a bit more regularly, though I did say that last time, and that didn't work out well. Please follow me over my Instagram at csims22. I've been Craig, you guys have been great, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. I don't even know if that made sense anymore. I've done this so many times. Oh, why do I do this? I'm helping you. I'm helping you guys. Okay, I will get better at them. I will. I'll get better. I promise.